And we reached the hadith an Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أفضل الجهاد من قال كلمة حق عند سلطان جائر رواه الترمذي وأبو داود وابن ماجه. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the best form of jihad, the best form of striving in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is speaking the truth in the presence of a tyrant ruler. Speaking the truth in the presence of a tyrant ruler. Al-jihad, contrary to popular belief, has many meanings and many manifestations. So, in our modern context, with the enemies of Islam who want to yushawwihuna surat al-Islam or sum'at al-Islam, those people who they want to basically spread a false message or present a false perception of Islam and what Islam stands for. They give the impression that jihad, they call it holy war. And basically what that means is it is Muslims recklessly and haphazardly going around and just killing people, right? And there are certain avatars for this, like ISIS and that type of thing. And if these types of people do anything, they will say, these are the Muslims. This is Islam. This is Islamic jihad, right? And it shows you the disingenuousness of those people who are talking about Islam and what Islam stands for, etc. Sadly, there are certain people who call themselves scholars of Islam, like Orientalists, the Western scholars of Islam, who should know these types of texts from the Quran and from the Hadith, which clarify that that jihad has many meanings and many manifestations. But they continue to what? They continue to call it something that it's not, and describe actions which are not consistent with Islamic jihad as what? As Islamic jihad. So this is an example of the Prophet ﷺ teaching his ummah that jihad has many meanings, many manifestations. So for example, in one hadith, he taught the Muslims that there's something called jihad al-nafs, the striving against one's soul. And in that hadith, he called it the greatest jihad. He called it the jihad al-akbar, right? The greatest jihad. The jihad against what? Against one's own soul. No mention of that in the media, though. You also have al-jihad bil-lisan, right? Al-jihad bil-bayyin wal-burhan. It's like, for example, when a person strives against his opponent with what? With his tongue. Clarifying the truth and presenting the proofs and evidences that will convince his opponent. They don't talk about that. There's also al-jihad bil-Quran. Allah says in the Quran, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي, I'm sorry, he says, وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. He says, and strive against them with it, meaning what? With the Quran. A great jihad. Y'all see that? None of those jihads have anything to do with what? With taking life. Y'all see that? And then there is al-jihad bis-sayf. There is the striving against our enemies and our opponents and our adversaries with weaponry. But even then, that has what? It has rules and regulations, right? It has rules and regulations, which they don't talk about. Al-Muhim, so jihad, linguistically, fi lughat al-Arab, it basically means to strive and exert maximum effort in the achievement of an objective. To strive and exert maximum effort in the achievement of an objective. Convincing your opponent. You make every effort and you exert every energy to what? To convince your opponent that what? This is right and this is wrong. Right? The Prophet in this hadith, he says, afdalu jihad. The best form of jihad. And what the Prophet actually meant was min afdal jihad. What he actually meant was one of the best forms. Not the absolute best form, and we know this because there are other hadith where the Prophet said the same thing. So for example, he said, لكن أفضل jihad hajjun mabrur. He said the best jihad is a hajj which is what? Which is accepted. A hajj which is what? Accepted, and a hajj which is free of what? Those things which will invalidate it. Y'all see that? Hajj mabrur. Another hadith, He was asked, فَأَيُّ جِهَادٍ أَفْضَلُ? Which striving, which jihad is the best jihad? He said, مَنْ جَاهَدَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ بِمَالِهِ وَنَفْسِهِ. He said, the one who fought against the mushrikeen with his body and what? And with his wealth. He gave everything he had, fighting against the mushrikeen. And in the riwayah of At-Tirmidhi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, إِنَّ مِنْ أَفْضَلِ الْجِهَاد. And he mentioned the same hadith, right? كَلِمَةُ حَقٍّ in the Sultan al-Jair. So he said, indeed, from the best forms, right? So that clarifies us what the Prophet meant. He said, this is one of the best ways to wage jihad. And this is good because not everybody can do jihad with what? With weaponry. Not everybody can do that. That shows you how Islam makes sure that people can be what? Included, and people get other opportunities to do what? To do these great deeds, like jihad. Y'all see that? This hadith teaches us that the adversary, the opponent in a jihad, is not always a non-Muslim who's trying to kill you or take your property. It's not always that. It's not always somebody who's trying to conquer your land. It could be somebody who shares your faith, but they've what? They've deviated. And it also tells you that enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong is a form of what? It's a form of jihad. It's a form of what? Of jihad. A jihad that all of us what? Can do. You have some people, ya ikhwan, sakiteen, shaitan akhras. You have some people who, they don't say anything. They're like a mute devil. They see wrong thing being done. They don't say anything. And then that person will say, man, I wish I could go wage jihad. I remember back in the days of, and I'm about to date myself, I remember back in the days of the jihad in Afghanistan. You'll have people who don't do anything. Some of them don't pray. And they'll be like, man, I wish I could join the mujahideen. Come on, man. Pray. That's your jihad. Get up for Fajr. Y'all see that? طيب. Then he said, kalimatu haqq. Or he said, قول كلمة حق. كلمة حق. قول كلمة حق. Speaking the truth. Basically, that means enjoying what is right and forbidding what is wrong. Basically, telling the person if they do or say something wrong, that's wrong. And if they are failing, they're falling short and not doing something they're supposed to do, tell them, hey, you're supposed to do this, etc., and so on. And the Prophet then he said, Sultan Jair. He said, a tyrant ruler. So he's talking now about someone who abuses their power, someone who behaves immorally and perhaps amorally, and appears to have no conscience whatsoever. So now the question comes, how is this the best form of jihad? Or one of the best forms of jihad? And there are two answers to that question. The first one is, rulers have tremendous influence over what? Over people. They have tremendous influence over the people. And so, if they do wrong, people will generally do what? Follow suit, and they will justify and substantiate the wrong things they do by saying, look, well, Amir so-and-so is doing it. The king is doing it. So, you see that? So if you can reform the ruler, you can reform the whole society. Y'all see that? That's one of the reasons why it's one of the best things. If you can convince the ruler that something is right, and they do that, that can do what? That can cause that good thing to be something that spreads amongst the entire society. And if you convince them that something they're doing is wrong, and they should stop doing it, that again will do what? It can influence the whole society, especially because he has the power to say, hey, whoever does this, I'll punish them. He can use the power of the Sultan to what? To make people do the right thing. If he himself is convinced it's the right thing. Y'all see that? So this is one of the reasons why it's the greatest, or one of the forms of greatest jihad. The second one, the scholars of Islam, they said, listen, when you go to face your enemy on the battlefield, you go into it and you are oscillating. You are swinging back and forth between al-khawf or raja. Part of you is hopeful that you are going to overcome your enemy and defeat your enemy. And you're not going to be wounded. You're not going to be maimed. You're not going to have an eye gouged out. And you're not going to be killed. Right? You're hopeful of that. At the same time, on the other side, you're afraid that what? You may be maimed. You may be killed. You may have an eye gouged out. You may You may lose all of your property, and you may be defeated by your enemy. You see that? You're afraid of those things. So you're kind of like oscillating between the two. But they say that when you stand before the sultan, you're at his what? At his mercy. You are subjected to his whims. And if you say the truth and he doesn't like it, then you're subjecting yourself to potential execution. He may just what? He may just have you executed right there. Or he may imprison you indefinitely. He may torture you, etc. And people who come from certain countries where they have tyrannical rulers, they know about this. There are some countries in the Muslim world, we won't name them, where a person will say something about the government. They'll say something about the government. And they'll be arrested. They'll just disappear. Their family won't know nothing, won't know what happened to them. They'll just disappear. They could be dead. They could be in prison. They could be being tortured. They don't even know. Sometimes the person knows that they're after him. So he flees. And this is true too. There are people who have fled certain countries where there was basically a warrant for their arrest, or there was intentions to arrest them because of something they said. So they fled. And these rulers will do what? Since I can't get my hands on you, I'm going to go to your father and I'm going to arrest him. Person has a 70, 80, 90-year-old father who's infirm. Maybe he has some type of illness or different illnesses where he really does not need to be in prison. And he hasn't committed a crime. He didn't say anything. But to punish his son who fled the country, they'll do what? They'll imprison his father. And so when you stand before the sultan, basically the scholars say, you're afraid. There is no what? There is no hope. You are what? You are afraid. And if you in that state where you have very little hope or no hope, you still say the truth, that's what? That's the greatest jihad. That's a greater jihad than what? Jihad where there's hope and there's what? And there's fear. Y'all see that? So this is the other reason why the scholars said that this is what the Prophet said is the greatest jihad. I want to say two things before we close, and one of them is that what this hadith teaches us, one of the main things it teaches us is the importance of Muslims having courage. And we have a crisis right now in our ummah, a crisis of cowardice. We have a crisis of cowardice. And the reason why I say this is because we're in situations where we don't really have fear, or we don't have fear on that level of our leaders. For example, here in America, if you are in a community, like we're in a community, and the community has leadership. The community has leadership, it has people who lead it. And maybe they lead it in a way where we're like, we shouldn't be doing that. It's not proper. See what I'm saying? So for example, there are some communities where around the end of October, they have something called Halalween. Halalween. Not Halloween. They'll have Halalween. And what they mean by Halalween is like we have a gym, a multi-purpose area, we have a school, we have a large masjid. And we're not going to send our kids out to trick or treat with the non-Muslim kids. But what we do is we invite the community to have their kids dress up and come to our community center. And in the different places, the classrooms and the multi-purpose area and different places, they can walk around with their little buckets and like a jack-o'-lantern, right? And we will give them what? We'll give them candy. And the celebration, the whole celebration will be conducted what? In our Islamic center, in a very, insulated and sterile environment. Y'all see that? Y'all see that? They'll do something like this. And they'll do it in the name of what? The Islamic community is going to offer Halalween. Right? Halal pork. Right? Al-Muhim. So they do this, right? So they do this, and people who come to that mosque and attend that mosque and who know better will do what? Will say nothing. Because they don't want to be called the religious police. They don't want to be called Wahhabi. They don't want to be called Mawlawi Sahib, right? Sahib, right? They don't want to be called names that are pejoratives and that are put downs, and they don't want to be put blacklisted. They don't want to be ostracized. They want to see these are the extremists. Don't talk to them. Don't be nice to them. They're the people who go to extremes and tell us everything is haram. They're the haram police, right? So really, the fear of just that, of being called names, keeps them from what? Saying anything when they know something is wrong. A crisis of cowardice. You see that? A crisis of cowardice. Just afraid of the littlest amount of what? Of pushback. The littlest amount of, I guess you could say, harm, or the littlest amount of sacrifice. Let's call it that, sacrifice. Just don't want to make that sacrifice. If we can't make this little sacrifice, how can we make the bigger sacrifices that will ultimately bring back the Khilafah, that will ultimately liberate Palestine? You see that? All the talk we do. You see what I'm saying? Our actions don't match our aspirations. You see that? People who can't say we shouldn't have halal meat. That's all you have to say. We shouldn't do it. That's all you have to say. People who can't do that, they can't liberate Palestine. Right? They can't. People who can't, for example, retweet. Like somebody tweets, Palestine will be free, for example. And a person's like, they want to share it. But they're like, nah, I mean, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want people to look at me differently at work. You see that? And so they just what? They close the phone. It's like the crisis of cowardice. Islam and the Muslims need courage. Some level of courage. Courage is what's going to bring us back. It's part of it. It's not the only thing, but it's part of what's going to bring us back. And the fact that we are cowards is what is a big part of what's holding us back. We don't say anything, and I want everybody to look inside themselves. You were in a community. It's a pretty good community. Alhamdulillah. I don't think we don't do halal meat, right? Okay, but I'm sure we do some things that are wrong. We do some things that you think are wrong. Have you ever talked to leadership about it? Some people talk to leadership and they get a response that shuts them down. I get that, but I'm just saying, don't be the person who I don't say anything because what? Because, oh, they're not going to like me. They're going to call me haram police. That cowardice is not helping anyone. It's not helping you. It's not helping what? The leadership. And it's not helping the ummah. The ummah has to what? Has to have some intestinal fortitude. Think about the people, the first people who were given Islam and what they did in a short span of time. From the time of the Prophet's immigration to the time of what his passing, 10 years. Look how Islam spread and exploded and grew. That didn't happen except through what? Intestinal fortitude and courage and willing to make the sacrifice. Fighting has been prescribed for you and you don't like it. You're afraid. They were afraid. They were human just like us. But you know what they did? They ignored their fear and did what Allah told them to do. And look how Allah blessed them. The same thing can happen for us. It's a formula. But we have to what? We have to follow the roadmap. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the formula. Do what they did. But we're afraid. We're afraid of being called names. You see that? Last thing I want to say is, and it's related to this, leaders need good advisors. Leaders have no end to their bad advisors. Bitanat as-su, the people who advise them with the bad things and advise them to do the wrong thing and encourage them and embolden them to backbite and to slander and to lie and steal and cheat. Encourage them to be prejudiced and biased. Encourage them to be cliquish. We empower ha'ula'i. We empower these people, and we what? We deny other people any chance to have any influence. There's no limit to the number of people who would advise them like this. Where are the people who advise them to be what? To be like Umar ibn al-Aziz, Umar al-Khattab, Uthman, Ali, Abu Bakr. Where are those people? We have to be those people. Even if they call us haram police, even if they call us Wahhabi. We have to be those people. We have to be. There has to be a balance. The only people who speak can't be the people who speak evil. And they do the opposite of what the Prophet said. The Prophet said, قَوْلُ كَلِمَةَ حَقٍّ عِنْدَ سُلْطَانٍ جَائِرٍ. They do what? قَوْلُ كَلِمَةَ بَاطِلٍ. They say what? They say the wrong things. They encourage them. And they tell them, yeah, you're right. you're right, you're doing the right thing, and they know they're doing the wrong thing, but they just tell them what they want to hear. Mujamalatan. They just want curry favor with them, and yeah, you're doing the right thing, and everything you do is right, and don't listen to those people, etc. and so on. So they need good advisors, and we need to be those good advisors. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. Wa jazakumullah khairan. I'm gonna go out and get you guys. I got the fruit in the car. I brought the tea, but I didn't want to be late. Already later than I already was. So I'm gonna go get the fruit, and we'll sit and do some hospitality, inshallah. Wa jazakumullah khairan.